Everybody is here. Great. Nice crowd this morning. Welcome, everybody. My name is Joe Eisman, one of the co-hosts of LTADchat live on Zoom. A few weeks ago, we started this format as an extension of what's been going on for, I guess, the past probably 4 or 5 months on Twitter, where we have an LTADchat there as well. This week, we have Mike Jennings to discuss the intersection of LTAD and school physical education. Mike has done this presentation for us before at one of our LTAD playgrounds. And right now he is slotted to do this presentation at the NSCA National Conference in July. Obviously, that date is pending. I think they're going to make the announcement on that June 3rd, I believe, if not sooner. Given the circumstances. What Mike's going to do is just do a 18-minute TED Talk, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. A lot of smart people on this call, a lot of people that want to have their voice heard, have their questions answered, and have some dialogue amongst ourselves. So we want to foster that. So that's why we're only giving him an 18-minute slot. Before I turn it over to Mike, just a reminder that the next LTAD chat on Twitter is on Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic is plyometrics in youth and high school athletes. And then next Saturday, April 11th, we will have a panel from 2 middle schools and high schools discussing their model of strength and conditioning or athletic development going from the middle school and then syncing that right up to the high school. And I see that Scott Meyer is on the call this morning. Scott is from Farmington, Minnesota. He will be one of the presenters along with Chad Olson, who is at the middle school in Farmington. And then at the top of the mitten in Michigan, we're going to have folks from Traverse City Central, Doug Lee, who's at the high school, along with John Girton, who's at the middle school. So that'll be next Saturday, April 11th. And then on April 25th, we have the topic of coaching females. Erica Suter, Ivy Casagrande, and Krista Stoker will be sharing some insights on coaching young female athletes. And then the good news is we're going to continue to do this. We've had a lot of interest by a lot of different people from around the world to present. I'd probably say right now I have probably 8 to 12 people, either individuals or panel discussions, who want to get on and share information related in some regard to long-term athletic development. So kind of sets the stage for what this is about, what we're going to be doing in the future. And without further ado, I'm just going to turn it over to Mike and let him roll with this presentation.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Joe and Rick and everybody else involved in kind of putting these things on. Obviously, you know, at this time of the morning, you know, with 20 some odd people on, you can tell that this is a much needed and much appreciated kind of occurrence and event and happening. And these LTAD chats and LTAD, you know, conversations are always good to be had. And so I very much appreciate being a part of this and kind of offering up, you know, my experiences and my take on a couple of really kind of, you know, important things and try to shed some light on some questions that anybody might have. So I'm going to share my screen with some folks for a little bit. And while this is kind of popping up, like I said, the idea behind this, and like Joe said, is to really kind of show you the how we fit long-term athletic development in with a traditional physical education setting. And it's really important to understand that obviously, you know, we all have our different areas of expertise and we all have our different areas of kind of how and why we fit physical education in. You know, and so in my estimation, there is no better place for LTAD than in a traditional PE setting. So I'm very passionate about this. I'm going to do my best, absolute best, to keep this to the 18-minute mark. My goal is to be less, obviously, because I think a lot of people get much more from the conversation, the collaboration around these types of topics than just hearing some guy in Boise, Idaho talk. So again, my name is Michael Jennings. I am the director of Healthy Body at an educational service provider called Athlos, where we do everything kind of soup to nuts for schools. My emphasis obviously is everything physical education, youth sport, strength and conditioning, the whole gamut of essentially movement and movement experiences. And like I said, I want to try to talk to you about how we actually operationalize long-term athletic development into a PE setting. And kind of this time of presentations, a lot of people typically get into like the why am I here, right? Like they go into their accomplishments and their experiences and their, kind of background. And to be quite honest with you, like that's all fine and good, but that's not why I'm here talking with everybody today. That's not why I've kind of dug into the things that I've dug into and learned as much as I could about LTAD. The reason why I'm here is because it really kind of boils down to May of 2011, right? And to spare you a long story, and we can get into this later if anybody has questions, but to spare you a long story, in May of 2011 is when I realized that everything I had, whether it be character traits, whether it be accomplishments, whether it be, successes and failures, everything I had, I could really kind of boil down to getting from movement and play and physical activity and sport. Like I said, whether that be work ethic, whether that be job opportunities, whether that be school opportunities, everything I had. And so when I realized that, that's when I really figured out that I wanted to be a PE teacher, because I could garner those types of experiences with young people to give them and share with them the successes and the experiences that I did get growing up. And so around that time, obviously I did everything I could. I was a non-traditional physical education person. I graduated school with an exercise science degree. Then I went on to coach a little bit and wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I went back to school to become a physical educator. And since then, I've been doing everything I can to help move the profession forward, to help physical educators in every sense of the imagination. Excuse me. So my first year, as a PE teacher, as most teachers do, think that I was pretty hot stuff. I thought I was pretty good. I knew what I was doing. I was doing a lot of strength and conditioning for the classes at a high school, a pretty large high school in Central Illinois. And then, as a lot of people know about the public school setting, there were some kind of budget issues, and so I got shuffled around and moved to a middle school. And very, very quickly, once I got to the middle school, I realized that we were forcing a square peg into a round hole. We were doing a lot of things and asking a lot of things of students that just weren't really fitting and didn't really work. And unfortunately, right, the saying goes, you can't force a square peg into a round hole. Well, we were, and in some sense, we still are doing that. And the issue is not that it can't happen, but it actually can happen. And when it does happen, that square peg gets through the round hole, but it's broken into a bunch of pieces. And what I mean by that is we had these great kids, right, that really enjoyed or thought they enjoyed physical education and thought they enjoyed physical activity. And now they're doing things that they're like, wait a second, this is painful. This is not fun. This is not what I kind of envisioned myself doing, right? And so as we were forcing that square peg into the round hole, I realized that there are three essential problems with physical education at this time. One, students were hating to move, and that's on every level. That's, I was getting kids at the middle school level that were sixth graders, right? 10, 11, 12, 13 years old that hated to play games. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, all right, we're going to have a ton of fun. We got this great game that we're going to play that's going to work on this. And kids were just sitting like, I don't want to. And I was thinking back to, again, the quote unquote glory days, right? Of how do you hate to play games? And it's just mind blowing. How do you have to teach kids how to play, right? It was crazy to me that we had to teach kids how to play. We were talking before the call about, hitting a wiffle ball against a wall at a school just by yourself on a weekend, right? Or going out and shooting hoops, right? Those types of things just weren't happening. Then I recognized that we were forcing this buzzword right now, fitness, on people. right? And the reason was just for fitness, right? It was a kind of just, again, fitness for fitness sake. And nobody really could tell me what fitness meant or why we needed to be worrying about fitness and things along those lines, right? So we'll dig into that more in here in a little bit. But then the last problem is schools and teachers had zero clue what was going on above them and below them. And what I mean by that is from a vertical alignment standpoint. Middle school teachers didn't know what elementary school teachers were doing with their kids. High school teachers didn't know what middle school teachers were doing with their kids. And the other way was true as well, right? So I didn't know what I was supposed to be preparing my students for moving into high school. Elementary school teachers didn't know what they should be preparing their kids for moving into middle school. And those three things kind of set us up into a little bit of a spiral, right? And, there's no kind of ill will against any of these kind of aspects, but the long and short of it is, we found ourselves a little bit lost. We weren't sure as an educational system, right? As PE is concerned, we weren't sure where we were going and what we were doing. And so I started looking around for some things and how could we change it? And that's when I stumbled upon long-term athletic development, right? And you've all probably seen, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you've all probably seen something along these lines, right? The idea that, LTAD is an age and stage appropriate developmental pathway for athletes, right? For young people, for a cradle to grave model of movement and development, both physically, cognitively, emotionally, that whole gamut, right? And so, like many people, I was very excited about this from a physical developmental standpoint. And that's basically where I kind of started out on. I recognized that, hey, there's some physical developmental needs, and this kind of outlines that, right? I was a strength and conditioning coach. I was in the weight room a bunch. And so I liked it from that aspect. But even still, what really drew me to it, which a lot of people, in my opinion, overlook, are the two pathways that the LTAD model explicitly lays out, right? The excellence pathway and the participation pathway. And that to me screamed physical education, because I wasn't naive to say that the athletes that I got to work with and the students that I got to work with on a daily basis were all going to go to be professional athletes somewhere. But what we could agree on as physical education is that 90% of us have some type of goal or some type of mission that screams, we want our students to be active and healthy movers for life, right? And that's that participation pathway that I think is so crucial with regard to LTAD that gets overlooked. But again, that same pathway is why it fits so perfect. One of the reasons why it fits so perfectly within a traditional physical education setting. So as you know, the stages are broken down into rough estimations of ages for males and females. That can be a little bit tricky, honestly. And so, what we did is we dove a little bit deeper, kind of learning as much as I could about LTAD, and found out very quickly that it's not just the physical. It's much more than the physical, right? It touches on the cognitive, social, emotional, and moral development of young people. And anybody that has ever worked with a young person, whether it be teach, coach, train, or parents, right? That all of those things are changing like a roller coaster from kindergarten through 12th grade. And it's very important to understand what those needs are at a given time for our students and for our young people. And so diving into that even deeper, we decided to really kind of take this and break it down and change it from change it from ages, right? And just kind of put it into terms that PE teachers could understand. And that's grades, right? Kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and so on. All right. So we took these LTAD stages and put them into categories, right? These grade levels were then broken down based on what those athletes needed from a physical standpoint, a cognitive standpoint, social, emotional, moral, and everything in between, right? And so we have some key tenets at the bottom of this slide for what an elementary school PE kind of curriculum should look like. Well, and the first thing is we need to emphasize fundamental movement and fundamental sports skills. right? And a capital FUN. Okay, we want to focus heavily on unstructured and semi-structured play. We want to get rid of this idea of the dreaded fitness day. We want to incorporate foundational movement skills, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And we want to kind of assess on a regular basis to show the growth and the development over time, right? We want to promote social and self-awareness and everything else along those lines. As we transition into middle school, we move away from kind of the fundamentals as the key tenet to variety, right? Because 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is as much change as from all standpoints as a young person will likely go through in their developmental years, right? It is completely different from 6th grade to 8th grade. And a lot of times you can tell, right, these puny little 6th graders compared to the bearded 8th graders. And that's just in a 3-year span. And so we need to be able to provide a variety of activities to kind of build off of those fundamentals that we did in elementary school and really kind of dive into offering not only a variety of activities as far as participation, but a variety of teaching methods, a variety of skill sets, and really kind of open up the doors and the windows to everything that we can, so we can move forward into high school, having an idea of where we should be focused, right? So this is where we're going to really implement and cultivate those foundational movement skills. We can start to get into this kind of fitness day idea based on kind of some goal orientation and some intentional approaches. We want to promote teamwork and cooperative strategies. We want to, again, assess movement throughout the year. And now we can get into some of those traditional kind of quote unquote fitness assessments. Into high school now, okay, you can see at the top we have 2 different color boxes, and this is where things kind of really start to change from a standpoint of a participation pathway and the excellence pathway. In the white boxes, we see the excellence pathway, and then in the blue boxes, we see the participation pathway. And so you can tell, though, that nothing really changes from a developmental standpoint. The idea and the focus for high school, we think and we know should be choice and focus. We should be cultivating the kind of mindset of high school students making decisions for themselves, fully aware that not all of them are going to go on to play college sports, fully aware that not all of them are going to go on to play professional sports, but also, and most importantly, fully aware that they need to be able to determine the things that they enjoy and be able to focus on those things. So we're emphasizing and developing lifelong healthy and active decisions, right? We want to continue to focus on goal-oriented fitness days. We want to cultivate all the movement skills, teamwork, cooperative strategies. This is where, again, if they are on that excellence pathway, that training for specific focal points within extracurriculars could be what they need, but it doesn't have to be. So this is the time when I start talking with physical educators specifically that, I get everybody pumps the brakes, right? Because they've heard me use the word athlete a bunch. They've heard me, say long-term athletic development. And I start to get these kind of concerns about, wait a second, like not all of our students are athletes. Not all of them have ever been athletes, and a lot of them never will be athletes, right? And then they start getting kind of up in arms about this fitness idea. And what do you mean fitness, right? And haven't you read John Rady's book about how, fitness makes you smarter? And haven't you heard Paul Zintarski talk about, the fitness in the brain and fit kids learn better and all this, that, and the other thing? And I'm not here to knock any of that. And I actually believe that wholeheartedly. And I know that's great work. And I really appreciate all the things that those people are doing. But the long and short of it is, hey, we're all athletes, right? The NSCA states that athleticism is the ability to repeatedly perform a range of movements with precision and confidence in a variety of environments, which require competent levels of motor skills, strength, power, speed, agility, balance, coordination, and endurance. And as we all know, right, those 2 words in white, those are health-related components of, guess what? Fitness. And those bolded words in black, those are skill-related components of, guess what? Fitness, right? So we are working on fitness, but yes, we are all athletes. So kind of breaking that stigma that comes with that word in an educational sense is very important. So we begin to kind of after we clear up those questions, right, we begin to kind of lay this foundational work, right? We break it down into a little bit of a matrix that covers kind of 5 key topics, quote unquote, within a physical education setting. And those topics are play type, competition, movement skills, assessment, and fitness days. And so kind of giving those topics their due with regard to what is needed at each level. So with play type, obviously, we're thinking that we've got 2-ish kind of types of play: unstructured, structured, and semi-structured, right? And unstructured obviously is that free play, open-ended, student-led. Structured being the other end of the spectrum, where I'm telling you what to do, I'm setting the goals, I'm setting the targets, etc. And then semi-structured is that kind of in-between land, right? Where we are guiding and suggesting and giving provocations about what to do or what we could do to be better. And so finding that balance and using it accordingly is very important. From a competition standpoint, I want to be very clear. This is not me saying that everybody deserves a ribbon. I'm not a ribbon guy. I'm not a participation trophy guy, but I do firmly believe that there's a time and a place for competition. And we need to know when that is and how to appropriately do it. There's plenty of effective motivators out there that are not having students compete against one another, right? Growth and development, form and technique, compete with yourself. Those types of things really drive students pretty well, much more so than a lot of people give them credit for. The key here is understanding that it's not necessarily the teacher that is putting any undue pressure on students with regard to competition, but it's oftentimes other students, and it's oftentimes unseen. So understanding when and how to give that competition its due is very important. Movement skills for our purposes, I firmly believe this. I think how I approach movement skills is I break them into 3 classifications: fundamental movement skills, fundamental sports skills, and foundational movement skills. You can see those. This is not an exhaustive list. This just kind of gives people an idea. And we can talk about these a little bit more later on. But as you can see through this kind of matrix, kind of working from fundamental movement skills, incorporating in using those movement skills into sports skills, right? Incorporating those into activity settings, and then late incorporation in elementary school of these foundational movements. Assessment, I think, is something that oftentimes goes overlooked in the field of physical education. It's the most misunderstood, misused, but in my opinion, most powerful tool we have. It does a lot of things for us. It does a lot of things for the students. It can take a lot of different forms. The one thing that I always have to harp on with physical educators is, we're assessing to monitor and provide feedback. This is not something that we have to, make this grandiose kind of process, but just monitor and providing feedback to our athletes is extremely important. And lastly, this idea of the quote unquote fitness day, the thing that scares most students away from PE, because if anybody in here is a physical educator, you've heard more times than I can count, is today a fitness day? Is today a fitness day? Is today a fitness day? Well, we need to find a way to get away from that kind of, term, right? That kind of stereotype. We need to understand that there are 2 types of fitness: health related and skill related, which we talked about a little bit ago. Too often we get fixated on the health related components, which an unfortunate truth is health related fitness hurts sometimes. If anybody's ever worked on cardiorespiratory endurance, you know that it's uncomfortable. You know that if you're looking to get, stronger or gain muscular endurance, you know that sometimes hurts, and the day after is uncomfortable, and not everybody can handle that. But the fact of the matter is, skill related fitness, which oftentimes goes overlooked, that's the fun stuff, right? That's the tag, that's the jumping, that's the playing, that's the throwing, right? And we forget about that. And so we focus too much on this kind of cardio and strength thing, which is all very, very important. But hey, there's 2 sides to the fitness coin, and we got to make sure that we're seeing both of them. So this is the reason that, we kind of slowly integrate these fitness days into our curriculum, make sure that they're, age and stage appropriate. We're focusing on both of them because we don't want to scare people away from movement. We sit here and we tell them like, hey, we got to be fit now, right? We got to get in shape now. But it's, again, what was our initial goal that we had as physical educators? It was long term, right? It was lifetime physical activity, not second grade, third hour PE, let's run the mile every day. So those are the types of things that we really got to be cognizant of with regard to fitness days. So all in all, here's the matrix, the foundation, right? This is kind of what guides the prescription for kind of PE, right? This is what every kid needs. These are the types of things that we can do. And quite frankly, with today's kind of setting and taking away school and taking away physical education and understanding that, hey, there's not a lot of movement happening in a structured setting, and a lot of things are going to change after COVID-19, and whatever that looks like, I don't know, but we can all probably agree that if we had an aligned approach to physical education, it's going to be very beneficial, because let's be honest, the one thing that has to come back eventually is kids in school, right? Young people back in school eventually. And so what better place than to start back with this movement than in physical education? But in order to do that most effectively, we have to have this as the foundation, right? And so again, that kind of lays the prescription for whatever ails you, right? And here it is. This, you know, this is the, in a nutshell, right? This kind of the fix all in my mind is every damn student, right? 1 time a day, 5 times a week, physical education, quality PE, right? All of these things that go with it, very beneficial. This is, in my mind, the best way that we can reach all students, right? This PE in schools takes away the haves and the have-nots. It evens the playing field, you know, socially, evens the playing field economically. This is what we got to do. So I am a few minutes over, so I apologize for that. I would love to take any questions, any and all questions. Very much appreciative. Again, my name is Michael Jennings. Here's some contact info. I can get you these slides. We can get you whatever you want. And I'm sure this is being recorded and we can check this out later on. But with that being said, thank you. And I'm here for as long as anybody wants to kind of take questions. It looks like the chat box has a few things in there that I haven't been able to check out so far. So Rick, Joe, you want me to just kind of dive into the chat box, or has anybody kind of earmarked anything? I don't know what
maybe
this
we
is going to look like.
Yeah, Michael, maybe we can just open the floor for questions. If people have specific questions about the presentation and they didn't have the chat box, and then we can get the other items in the chat box. And I think Rick and Tony have a few questions and points of dialogue as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And like I said, I know that this is a 10,000 foot view. You know, I'm buzzing through a lot of information on those slides. So, so please, I can't wait to take the questions.
Seems like it's a quiet group.
Yeah, the chat box is going though. I couldn't keep up with it, so I just said I'll catch up with it later.
Yeah,
Mike, I'll dive in. The last question that I posted in the chat box, and this is for you and anybody on the call really, but do you see this pathway that we all talk about and what you presented this morning, do you see it different for physical education than for youth, middle school and high school sports within a school or a community? And what would those differences be?
Yeah, so me personally, I don't see it all that much different. I do see it working in conjunction, right, with youth sport. Best case scenario, right, we're all aligned and we all know where we're going. And so whether it's in school or out of school, you know, how great would it be if a 4th grade basketball coach knew what was going on in 4th grade PE on a daily basis? And how great would it be if a 7th grade, you know, or an 8th grade coach who was starting to get their kids into the weight room a little bit more knew that their young people had a background in basic movements, foundational movement skills like squat, lunge, hinge, push, pull, brace, rotate, you know, those types of things. And so to me, I don't see it all that much different. I just see physical education as being a prime location for this kind of framework because of its accessibility and because of how often physical educators sometimes get to see their young athletes.
You made an important point and distinction at the end, and that is how often, and obviously there's great variability across our country with regards to the answer, to that question. So that can also pose a bit of a problem.
Absolutely. And I, excuse me, I spent most of my teaching career in Illinois, in the state of Illinois, and we were very fortunate for the vast majority of my career to have daily physical education for all public schools. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And currently in my position, I support a wide variety of situations where it's not unique, right? Where sometimes I've got schools that have PE 5 times a week. I've got some schools that have PE twice a week that I work with and help out. And so we kind of just play the cards that we are dealt the best we can.
Joe, I have a question.
Tony, you're asking me a question?
Well, I have a question for Mike. I was having trouble with my my audio, but I'm dialed in now. So great job, Mike. Quick question for you, and kind of maybe ambiguous, but as a physical educator, as somebody out there in the trenches, what do you find as some of the barriers that you encounter among those in your profession, in your discipline? What are some of the barriers for them, maybe perhaps being hesitant towards understanding or implementing this framework, which really is just another curriculum, right? I mean, the way that you described it. I guess the key word here are barriers. What do you find some barriers as a practitioner?
Yeah, well, so first and foremost, I touched on this very briefly. There is a little bit of a concern with using the word athlete. Trying to reframe that word and that stigma is a bit challenging. Next barrier on the list, and I feel like I can say this because I was a physical educator in the trenches for a long time, and I get it. PE teachers traditionally are a fickle group. We've been doing what we've been doing for a long time, and we believe in what we've been doing wholeheartedly, almost to a fault. And sometimes change is very challenging to people in those types of situations. And so even though this doesn't necessarily directly state a bunch of change, it's a conceptual change that some people have a hard time kind of making. And it's this idea of, oh, you mean to tell me that for the past 10 years, when I've been having my 5th grade students run the mile every Tuesday and Thursday because I read that Fit Kids Learn Better, you mean to tell me that that's not what I should be doing? You mean to tell me that I should be playing more games and I should be teaching these kids skills? That's tough because, they feel like they're doing what is right. And I'm not saying that it's wrong, but I'm saying that there's an issue. And I think we can all agree that we're not where we want necessarily to be. And the last thing is we're lacking in education from an evaluation standpoint in my mind. And what I mean by that is I remember vividly administrators coming into my PE space and evaluating me as a job, right? And I am very appreciative, and I like about teacher evaluations, but evaluating me on a lesson, and the feedback that I got was, wow, look at all these kids running, and look at how heavy they're breathing, and look at how active they are. This is so great. What a great job you did. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, well, like I could have just thrown up a Tabata circuit and not taught anything, and you would have thought that that's a great lesson. That's not a great lesson. Like I didn't do well today. That was not good. And so it's no fault to theirs because they don't know what they don't know. And so there's a few barriers, but I do think that kind of the stigma around the word athlete is a main one. I think change is hard for people that have been doing what they think is right for a long time. And there's a little bit of a lack of education from an evaluation standpoint and holding people accountable.
Thanks.
Mike, I have a question. Oh, wait, Joe has a question. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, thanks for the chat. I enjoyed it. I'm at an elementary PE position at a private school, and a lot of things that I encounter are kind of from the kids is they want to play sports, right? I got second grade boys that play club soccer upwards of 10 hours a week. Fourth grade girl that's on 12 to 14 hours of competitive gymnastics. And third and fourth grade boys that have been playing on super competitive flag football games, since they were in first grade. So like, I get a lot of pushback on like, when are we going to play a game like a basketball, a football? They want to just get right into it. And so, with the older groups, the third and fourth graders, when you try to incorporate like fundamental movement, sport skills, they kind of like blow it off and it's boring, and they kind of set the stage for the entire class, right?
Mm-hmm.
The energy there. And, part of me, I want to give to the kids opportunity to, control their own destiny, so to speak. But like, I can't, because it's not really, it's still like an adult concept, but run by super competitive kids.
Right. And I completely understand what you're saying. And I've experienced that myself, and I'm sure a lot of people on this call have as well. And to me, that's a little bit sad, right? Like the kids in second and third grade have this adultized kind of mindset of, hey, I play club soccer, so all I want to do is soccer, and every other sport is terrible, right? Or, I don't want to spend my time learning, these skills, throwing, catching, jumping, leaping. The trick, I think, is, and the method to the madness is really kind of tied up in our ability to find ways to relate what we are doing to the things that they like, right? And that's a tough thing to do sometimes. I also find that it can be very beneficial, and this is just kind of a one type of practice in physical education, but it can be very beneficial to split your groups up, split your classes up. Like, hey, great, I've got 8 kids that are diehard soccer. We can work on a few things, and we can let them go be diehard. And because right now we are in a soccer unit, right? And they don't necessarily need me right now because they're getting 12 to 14 hours of soccer a week. But this other group, we can work on those fundamentals, and then we can switch that around, right? Really kind of breaking things up and kind of parsing it out that way, I think is tough at times, but I think that's the way to go.
All right, Mike, I'll jump in real fast. I think it was a fantastic presentation also, and I see that we have a diverse group of folks on the call, coaches, phys ed teachers, administrators, all over the place. I really appreciate what you talk about with fitness, and I had a similar conversation with the Association of Delaware Physical Educators a few months back. You would have thought that I was blaspheming all over the place to say anything different about the word fitness. So Joe had a really good group chat question here about why the pendulum is always swinging from one aspect of human development and context to another one, whether it be fitness, social emotional learning, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts on how we can actually embrace an integrated holistic approach given all the fields that we're in?
Yeah, I think it starts with education, and I'm not necessarily saying that from a standpoint of we need to teach the teachers now, right? I think we do, and I think that's very important. But I think from the start, right, like from physical education, teacher education programs, I think we need to be embracing all of these things as a mindset, because right now in physical education, teacher education programs, there is a prime heavy price placed on one aspect of fitness, and that's the health related components. Because as we are in society, we are a prescribe, not prevent society, right? We don't work on prevention at all. We focus on just, okay, what can we give you now that you already are sick, right? And we focus very heavily on kind of that ailment and the sickness and type 1 and type 2 diabetes and hypertension and XYZ, right? And so the issue becomes, what can we do to fix that, as opposed to what can we do to prevent that? And in my mind, prevention comes from, all right, well, let's get these kids moving. But if you were to ask a kid to go run a mile, and this is any age, if I were to ask anybody on this call to go run a mile, might get a lot of people that say, oh, forget you, like I'm not doing that. But if I asked this same group of people, hey, you want to go play a game of tag? I bet I'd have twice as many people say, yeah, I'll go play tag. And we might actually travel a mile while running and playing tag, right? We might actually do that. And so we need to be able to rephrase this kind of concept about what fitness is and how we can get it out there to people. From a SEL standpoint and a holistic standpoint, there's a lot of push right now for kind of this integration of social emotional learning with regard to education in general, not just PE. I tell people all the time that as physical educators, we are absolutely lucky, because if you think about a math lesson, right? A math teacher trying to incorporate social emotional learning in a math lesson, yeah, they have to integrate some really interesting stuff, right? Social awareness, responsible decision making. How do you tie the Pythagorean theorem with social responsibility? Like, that's a hard thing to do. Social emotional learning is baked naturally into sport, is baked naturally into physical education, because we are naturally on teams. We are constantly competing or working with and or against somebody else. We are always scanning the environment for the good, the bad, and the ugly for ourselves and other people. And we are constantly navigating those situations, because that's just the very nature of physical activity. And so as our position roles in the holistic setting of a young person, it's not to integrate SEL or incorporate SEL, but it's to call attention to what is happening naturally in our young people. It's bring that about. Let them know, hey, this is what you are doing. We're not doing anything different. We're not doing anything extra, but this is what's happening, and this is how it can help you. Does that kind of answer your question, Rick?
Yeah, it does. Thanks very much, Mike. That's fantastic.
Hey, good morning. Just want to jump in here. Michael, I'm nodding my head a lot at what you're saying. My name is Terry Drain. I am a retired physical educator in California, taught for 34 years, but originally from Canada, University of British Columbia. And I am currently running for president of Shape America. So I find myself nodding my head because much of what's been said is what I believe too, that we need a shared vision for the profession so that we're all moving in the same direction with the same end in mind. And I think I want to add to what your list, Michael, for what we're missing. You started with the definition of an athlete, but I think we're also missing leadership. I think we need leadership from our professional organizations, because right now we're getting, and possibly for a long, long time, if not forever, mixed messages on what we are doing and what we're supposed to be doing. So I think we need that leadership and that messaging just to guide the profession. Not that it's going to solve everything, but I think it's an important step that's missing. And that's why I'm running. So fingers crossed that I get elected and I'm able to make a difference.
Gary, thanks for joining the call, and thanks for introducing yourself to everybody, and making it known, that to this group, which is primarily, strength coaches, athletic development specialists, that, Shape is part of this community as well. Totally agree about the leadership thing. But here's the other part. And as Rick mentioned, there's a lot of different players on this call, and, we have a lot of different organizations. And again, I think if a person from one of those organizations was on this call, they would all be shaking their head as well, but they all stay in their silos. So that's the other part of the leadership as well, right? Getting all of the leaders and all of the organizations on the same page so that we can move forward as well. So just open to you or anybody else, like strategies to go about that process.
Yeah. Well, I think there needs to be a voice. within the organization. I see part of my challenge will be to convince Shape to open their eyes and take a seat at the table, and then we can all get to work. But I think that needs to happen in every organization.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Terry. And I think we've had this talk actually back. We talked about this a little bit at Caperd this past February, I believe. And I think something that has to happen with regard to these kind of organizations is we have to be able to find what our actual mission or goal is. We have to have a unified voice, and then we have to align those voices with one another, if that makes sense, in my opinion. And I don't know how that's done. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know how that's going to be done. But Tony talks a lot about this, and Terry, you mentioned it too. If I ask 10 PE teachers what's the purpose of physical education, I'm going to get 10 different answers. If I ask 10 administrators what the purpose of physical education is, I'm going to get 10 different answers. If I ask, Shape America, and then I ask every state association of physical education, health, recreation, and dance, I'm going to get 50 different answers, right? We have to find a way to find what is valued and leverage that in a unified sense, and that's a heavy lift, I think.
Well, agreed. And then the landscape is changing as we sit here, and we're going to come out of COVID-19, I think, with different priorities, not just as a profession, but as a society. But great opportunity, I think, too.
Yeah, I agree.
Something I just wanted to chime into. Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm the manager of athlete development from US Lacrosse. I actually get to work with Tony on a lot of physical literacy stuff. I know for our efforts, some of the strategies that I'm employing, because I was a PE teacher, math teacher, taught other things, have education background, and I'm bringing to US Lacrosse is, as I'm building like our updated curriculum and unit plan, being very intentional about utilizing Shape's national standards and grade level outcomes, but also our core value of physical literacy, and being very intentional of, our lacrosse unit plan, our curriculum that I'm updating isn't for the purpose of preparing people or kids for the field game. It's to be physically literate, lifelong, healthy people. And so being very intentional about, okay, yeah, here's, our skills of passing and catching, but really we're teaching kids how to throw and catch. When we talk about ground balls or we talk about doing a dodge, we're talking about invasion games. So a lot of what we do, especially with our coach development side, is to use games for learning. So how can we say, we take sharks and minnows and put a lacrosse stick in your hand, and now you're working on cradling, now you're working on dodging, but you're also working on acceleration, deceleration, you're working on balance, changing directions. And so really calling that attention for physical educators, and using that strategic terminology versus for a coach, I'm just here's the skill. But being very intentional about having some syncing of information with that. So the PE teachers get kind of more of the pedagogy and the theory. The coaches get kind of here's the skill talk and vocabulary. But ultimately being intentional that whether they're in a PE classroom or on the field, we're still working on physical literacy. We're still trying to encourage the lifelong participation and just using lacrosse as a vehicle to do that. So I just wanted to share that input, and also just if any feedback or ideas people have to further make sure that we're moving in the right direction would be very helpful too.
Well, I would love to say thank you very much for the work that you're doing. I think Joe mentioned how great of a job US Lacrosse has been doing bridging the gap between physical education and kind of the ADM, right? And I think I would love to second that. And so thank you again. From a physical education standpoint, I wish my one thought and my one kind of hope for people is I wish more PE teachers would utilize what organizations like US Lacrosse have to offer. And I think that there's a little bit of lack of understanding what is out there. And so I guess my suggestion would be, continue to reach out to physical education programs and state organizations and, county organizations and regional organizations, because, you guys are doing wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things, from everything from equipment to lesson plans, like you just mentioned. And I don't think that's necessarily known all the time. And, I'll be the first to admit, I never taught a lacrosse unit as a PE teacher for a lot of reasons. One, we didn't have the equipment. Two, I never played lacrosse. I've got no idea how to play lacrosse. I've got, I'm interested in it, but it's never something that I could do as an educator. And so I'm not resentful. I'm frustrated with myself for not ever getting out there and finding resources like you, Lauren, and US Lacrosse to help with that and offer kids an opportunity. Because even when I was teaching in Illinois, my last few years there, lacrosse was getting bigger and bigger every year. And I'm sorry that I missed the boat, so to speak. And so, like I said, I think kind of finding ways to reach out and offering those materials to people, I think would be very beneficial.
Yeah, and I also want to note, just for everyone to know as well, with this updated curriculum for the educators, it's also going to come updated professional development for teachers so that we can directly and effectively communicate with PE educators to say, like, hey, here's how you teach this. We also do have a grant process and grant cycles that go throughout the year to get equipment into the hands of school districts and schools. So I'd also encourage, just look at our website, look to see when that application process is kind of opening in. I'm not sure, just because, we all know everything going on. But we, as much as possible, want to offer those resources. And like one of the newer updates will be consistent, like professional development workshops and opportunities, so that, like you said, teachers that have never played or don't know the sport or have heard of it can have those resources. And part of that, I do want to be intentional about connecting to local organizations. So ideally pinging, like you said, Illinois, there's tons of lacrosse going there. So if we get to a point where we get to offer professional development, I also want to include the local organizations to say, like, hey, here's where you can connect with me or have a constant touch point with the sport beyond the classroom. So we're moving in that direction. So thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, Mike, looks like you're excited to say something there.
I'm just excited. I'm just looking through and seeing all the people on the call, and this is the type of thing that gets me geeked up. Like I just got to spend, 55 minutes talking PE with 40 or however many people are on here. Like I'm just excited. So it's a good start to my Saturday. I'll tell you what.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks. There was one question on here from Darnell. Darnell, thanks for being on the call as well. He posted something over here in the chat about research that's needed. We know what doesn't work, but what are your thoughts on a research emphasis at a grassroots level, or what should be done at the grassroots? I think what I'm hearing that's really exciting in this call this morning is that we have a lot of, as Tony Marino would say, boots on the ground, people who are out there doing the work, as well as administrators and those in leadership roles. So it's one of the few times you get people from the bottom up and the top down. So from a research or a practical application perspective, what do you see as our next steps after this call ends? How do we all get geeked out, and what are we going to do for Monday?
I think it is, in my opinion, when I talk to people about this stuff, I always say, don't let the conversation stop here, right? Whoever it is that you're going to talk to on Monday, talk to them on Monday. And hopefully, if you're actively engaged in this, maybe you wrote something down. Think about what you can do to implement a portion of what we talked about today, right? It doesn't have to be the whole thing. Like, this is by no means a one day I'm here, the next day I think about this, and then the third day it's done. Like, it's a process. And I think I saw it on the chat box a few minutes ago. It's reflect, I don't remember what everybody said, but like reflect, revise, repeat, or reflect, respond, revise, react, like that's what we have to do, in my opinion. And And it's finding a piece at a time and using it and putting it together and moving forward, right? It's asking the administrator, hey, what do you think about looking at our PE curriculum? It's asking the district leader, hey, what do you think about vertically aligning our physical education curriculum? Or it's asking a youth sport organization leader, hey, can we revise what we are offering our young coaches or our young, younger levels? What can we do? Start that conversation, but don't start it in a sense of just having a conversation, right? Start the conversation with an action plan in place. You all got up early to listen to this chat on a Saturday. Obviously you're passionate. Obviously you care. Don't let it stop at the conversation. That would be my next thing. From a research standpoint, Rick and the NSCA has done a fabulous job of putting out very digestible bits of information about LTAD, where it's not necessarily a overly quote unquote academic. It's very digestible, very easy to understand. There's a lot of great stuff. And I'm sure, Rick, maybe you can speak to this better than I can about where to necessarily find that information, but that's a great place to start and to read. There's textbooks, there's all sorts of things that we can find and do. The LTAD chats that this group of people are putting on a regular basis is great also. I've seen a lot of people on this call right now. I've had a lot of long conversations with that are all very knowledgeable. I would just continue to encourage people to reach out. Obviously, you can, if anybody has questions more specifically with what we do from an LTAD standpoint in PE, I'd love to continue this conversation with anybody and everybody. If you are interested in what, I do at Athlos with regard to healthy body, we can talk about that. Anytime, any place, and just let me know.
Thanks, Mike. That was great stuff.
Good.
Joe, you want to point out where we're going to be posting all of this?
Yeah, probably a good time to wrap up. Yeah, thanks, Mike, for the presentation and the discussion today. Thanks for everybody for being here. This was recorded. So once it gets processed, we will post it to social media channels. We're in the works of getting a website where we can post all of our LTAD chat, both from Twitter and from the live Zoom chat. So just as a reminder, Tuesday night on Twitter, topic is plyometrics. Next week, Saturday, same time, same channel. But with that said, given all of the Zoom bombing, we may do password protected. So be on the lookout for that as well. Again, we'll post that in social media channels. So where to find the password and everything will be provided there. So Rick and I are going to talk about that in the coming days. Thankfully, we weren't Zoom bombed this morning. But again, yeah, next week, same time, same channel. Topic is comprehensive unified programming from the middle school to the high school level. So 2 different schools, one both with a middle school provider and a high school coach, and they'll talk about how they link everything up. It'll be a panel discussion, so no formal presentation. I'll have a set of questions to get us rolling, and then we'll just feed questions in via the chat box and live. So hopefully you can join us for that. All right, have a good Saturday.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. And like I said, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to continue the conversation with anybody and everybody. So thank you again for your time. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, everybody, for putting it on.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Everybody have a great day. Thanks for being on the call with us.